r/NoSleep. Posted by you/Kessal_the_Viking. Don't ever accept a gift from Asparina. You may be enslaved for life. This all started 1 month ago. I was laying in bed suffering from chronic stomach pain, as I often do, and wishing desperately for it to end. I have to adhere to a strict digestive routine or else I'll be paying for it the entire night. But sometimes it doesn't matter and the nausea and pain comes on in full force, rendering me almost immobile. My bed faces the TV and it was turned on. I was watching some kind of game podcast while trying my best to ride out the discomfort. By this time, I'd been dealing with this for over 10 years without really a permanent fix and losing sleep because of it was driving me to the brink. I closed my eyes and said aloud, "Please, end this. Take this away from me. I'm sick of feeling sick." But like so many other times, nothing seemed to happen. I sighed and balled my fists. It looked like I would get no sleep yet again. However, upon opening my eyes, I noticed movement on the right side of my room. Something was sitting on the edge of my writing desk. I squinted my eyes while trying not to appear aware of who or whatever was in my room, but couldn't make it out as if a darker air surrounded it. Then, a very calming voice creeped into my ear. It sounded feminine and gentle. "Ask and you shall receive," it said softly. I twitched in place from the sudden realization that an intruder was in my room. "Who are you?" I asked hurriedly. "You are in suffering, poor thing. Answer me." The figure floated over to me and held its finger to my mouth. "Hush now. Your pain is over." I felt instantly relaxed the moment its cold finger touched my lips and fell asleep as if I had been knocked out. The next morning I awoke to light streaming through my window. My TV had shut itself off and my room was pleasantly lit from the sun. I was reveling in it. "My, you slept well," came the same voice I'd heard the night before. I thought it might have been a dream. I turned my head back towards my desk and saw once again someone sitting on the edge of it. Since it was day, I could see that they appeared to be a woman wearing an odd dark robe you might find in a monastery. She had straight long brown hair with piercing green eyes. She was older, perhaps in her late 40s, and had an assortment of jewelry adorning her fingers. "Why, you? What did you do to me?" I asked fearfully. "I answered your wish," she said without breaking direct eye contact. "But who are you and how are you here?" She stood up and crossed the gap between my desk and the bed in the blink of an eye. Seeing her up close revealed even more peculiarities, like a small scar near her left eye and a necklace that held a blue crystal. She sat down on my bed next to me and smiled. "I am Asparina and I can be anywhere I want at any time." "So, you're some kind of god?" I asked, bewildered. Asparina laughed boisterously. "No, not quite. But I did answer your wish and now the gift must be returned." "The gift?" "Indeed. I have bestowed upon you the exact fix to your plight and now you must accept the terms of the deal." I stared into her strange eyes and swallowed. What deal?" I didn't even get a chance to agree or disagree on anything." "You did not reject my advance last night and thus the deal has been struck. Now, the terms," she said with a wriggling snake-like tongue. I was in immense pain and in the throes of sleep. I couldn't have possibly been in the right state of mind. "Yes, and I took your pain away. There is no time to argue." I sighed heavily. "What are you?" "I am Asparina." I furrowed my brow. "Yeah, you told me that, but what kind of being are you?" "That is not for your kind to know," she said quickly. "Enough questions. You must give a name." "A name?" I asked, confused. "A single name must be given," she said, staring intently at me as if her gaze aimed to pierce my soul. "For what purpose?" "That is not of your concern." "How do I know all of this is even real? Why shouldn't I just call the police right now and say there is an intruder in my home?" Suddenly, she disappeared. But her disembodied voice echoed in my room, "Because they would not find me. Now, a name and quickly. I am growing impatient." I thought long and hard before deciding to give the name of my asshole of a manager, Tim, at my old retail job. He would blame every problem on me even if it blatantly wasn't an issue I had caused. It got to a point where I brought his harassment to the attention of the store owner, who simply shrugged it off when Tim put up an innocent front. "Tim Warner," I said through clenched teeth. "A name has been given." Her voice echoed once more before fading away. "That's it? You're gone now? What happens next? I questioned aloud with no response. I realized suddenly that I felt great. I felt the best I had ever felt in years. My stomach had not even a semblance of pain and my mood was lifted because of it. Could this Asparina really have that kind of power? 2 days went by without a change in the way I felt. Life to me was good now that I wasn't being ruled by my stomach and I was going about my day as normal as could be. Then, I got a phone call. It was from a previous coworker named Evan. Hello? I answered calmly. Hey, it's Evan, he said solemnly. Yeah, I have your number saved in my phone. What's up, man? I know it's been a while, but you remember Tim, right? How could I forget that piece of shit? I asked with my blood beginning to boil. Well, you might be pleased to know that he's dead. I don't necessarily feel one way or the other about it, but you did work there for quite some time. So I thought I'd let you know, he said with a saddened tone. The world stood still. I wasn't sure if I heard him correctly. He's dead? I asked bewildered. Yeah, stomach aneurysm, I guess. Wow, well. I'm not exactly glad he's dead, but thanks for telling me. No problem, catch you later, he said before quickly hanging up. I couldn't believe it. Had I caused Tim's death? No, this was Asparina's doing, not mine. She was the one who told me to give a name, and if I knew this would be the outcome, I never would have done it. Between the turmoil of the news I had just received and my conflicted mind, Asparina appeared in my room once more. I barely noticed her standing in the corner next to my bed, but when I did, I was shocked. You again, I said while pointing a condemning finger. Why do you struggle with your choices? She asked in a whisper. Why? Because or rather, you just killed someone. You accepted my gift and in turn a name was given. That is the nature of my deal. I never agreed to your deal. I was out of my wits when you first approached me. Nevertheless, here we are. Why are you here? You got what you wanted. I was seething. Another name must be given, she said with wicked glowing eyes. Another? Yes. A new name must be given once the previous one ceases to exist. That is the nature of my deal. You didn't say any of that before. You're taking advantage of me. Salvation has a price, she said while uttering a diabolical cackle. No. I won't give you any more names. Then suffer further, she said before suddenly fading away as if she were no different than a cloud of dust. I sat perplexed with her last words bouncing around in my mind. What did she mean by that? My stomach wasn't hurting and everything else seemed relatively normal. That was until I had to go to the store. The world outside appeared unchanged, but I noticed my neighbor Bill, staring at me from his side of the fence like he wished to harm me. His malevolent gaze was concerning and unsettling. When I inquired about his behavior, he didn't respond. I gripped my keys tightly and turned towards my car instead of pressing him further, but he suddenly bounded over the fence in one swift hurdle and charged straight at me. I fiddled with my keys and managed to unlock the door before he reached me. I threw myself into the car and Bill slammed his fists against the driver's window. I started the car and looked into his eyes. They were bloodshot and intense. His mouth was frothing like a rabid animal and the veins in his face were protruding like his entire body was tense. Bill, what the hell are you doing? Get away from my window, I shouted through the glass. He breathed fiercely and seemed to regress further into a more feral version of himself. I started to grow worried that he would break the glass, so I put the vehicle into drive and sped down my driveway to the street. I glanced in my side mirror to see him chasing after me, but he eventually stopped once I reached the main road. That look in his eyes, it was like he was anger incarnate. Things only got worse from there. The drive to the store was nerve-wracking. Every time I looked to one side of the road or the other there would be someone watching me drive by. Each person had the same malignant expression on their face that Bill did. When I pulled into the store parking lot, I realized I had made a grave error. The store was loaded with people and the moment I stepped out of my car, they all stopped what they were doing and turned their attention to me. I proceeded to enter the store despite their prying eyes and did my shopping in complete silence. Every aisle had another customer transfixed on me with such anger in their eyes, and if they were standing in the way of something I needed, I just decided not to go near them. By the time I was wrapping up, it was obvious I was being followed. The other shoppers were gathering and trailing behind me and I got the feeling I was about to be at the mercy of the mob. When I reached the register, the cashier didn't respond to my friendly, "How are you today?" She only stared at my hands as I placed each item on the conveyor belt. Suddenly, someone grabbed onto my wrist with an iron grip. I turned to see a hulkingly tall man with a large beard and curly blonde hair. He was baring his teeth and breathing like a primeval spirit had possessed his body. "Can I help you?" I asked a bit harshly. He was hurting my arm. He didn't respond, his grip only tightened. "Let me go, you're hurting me." I tried to pull away but his grip was far too strong. Then, another person grabbed my other arm and they pinned me to the floor. I thrashed and flailed the best I could but no amount of effort was changing my predicament. I even kicked one of them in the stomach but it didn't faze them in the slightest. Then, a pair of pliers appeared above my head. I knew what was coming, I could sense it, but the overwhelming weight against my limbs prevented me from doing anything about it. A rogue hand, presumably belonging to the same individual with the pliers, reached down and attempted to pry my mouth open. When I couldn't fight it any longer, I allowed their hand inside before biting down with as much pressure as I could muster. They yelled in anguish before slamming their bare fist onto my forehead which nearly knocked me senseless. I felt the foreign texture of metal enter my mouth followed by a vice on one of my molars. I tried to kick and flail, I really did, but it was useless. The pain I experienced was excruciating and unlike anything I had ever felt before. There was a horrendous bout of tugging and then, I heard a popping sound. It was done. They had yanked my tooth out and after all that agony the man holding the pliers leaned over and said, "This is the cost for refusal." Then, he smiled and I was released. I got to my feet quickly. Blood was pouring out of my mouth like a faucet and I was feeling lightheaded. The people in the store watched me intently as I left and I walked slowly to my car. No groceries and one tooth short. There were some napkins in the glove box that I stuffed in my mouth and once my head stopped swimming, I drove home. Bill wasn't outside any longer and there were no obstacles from my vehicle to the front door. My mouth was aching terribly, I wanted to cry and curl up into a ball in the corner until I withered away. But, upon entering my bedroom, Asparina appeared. I scowled at her and held my hand against my jaw. "I did nothing to deserve this," I said the best I could, although it sounded a bit garbled. She smiled deviously. "You refuse to give another name." I lashed out at her. "I'm not playing this stupid deal bullshit. I want my life back, my tooth back." "Then you will continue to suffer," she said quietly before fading out of existence. I stood in the middle of my room for far too long. I just couldn't bring myself to do anything and the pain in both my head and my mouth were tremendously distracting. I did my best to remedy my wounds before laying down to sleep. The events of the day had terrified me, brought me to tears and had thoroughly exhausted every aspect of my being. I sought rest, and as my eyes closed like iron curtains, I felt a modicum of relief. However, it would not last. I was awoken by the noise of a door creaking on its hinges. I'm a light sleeper and any sound, even the flicking of a switch is enough to rouse me. My jaw was swollen and the obtrusive creaking was making my head thrum. I peered into the darkness of my room. The sound wasn't coming from my bedroom door, which was locked, so, it must have been coming from somewhere else in the house. I carefully put some clothes on and grabbed the baseball bat I kept next to my bed. I started to walk towards the door. It was my goal to listen for movement outside. But, just as I was taking my last step, I felt a stinging and stabbing pain in my right foot. The pain caused me to fall backwards and bounce my head against the floor. I felt stupid for not turning on a light, but I didn't want to give myself away to whatever was outside my door. My foot was tingling and burning. I struggled for my phone and turned on the flashlight to reveal a sharp row of spikes protruding from the floor in front of my door. I'm lucky I was moving slowly because if I hadn't, those spikes would have pierced through my entire foot. As it stood, they only pricked the bottom, which was painful in its own right. Anger welled up inside of me. I hated this torture I was being subjected to for refusing to volunteer individuals for death. I pounded my fist against the floor several times in frustration, but a chorus of whispers ceased my actions immediately because they were approaching my door. Something was dragging against the carpet and the whispers became more and more prominent. They were spewing hushed lies like, "You're a murderer, and selfishness leads to death." When it finally reached my door, I was too afraid to move. Even though I had the bat, I didn't think it would matter to whatever sinister thing was beyond that wooden barrier. I thought I had locked the door. I always do. I make it a routine to push the little button that solidifies my solitude from the world, but the knob began to turn. And when I heard the familiar click of the door releasing from its hinges, my heart sank. Slowly it crept open. I turned my light on and shined it in front of me. A creature appeared, one profoundly evil. If I were in hell, it was what I'd expect a demon to be. 4 limbs kept it suspended from the ground, but they were arms only. The entire body was covered end to end with faces and each was whispering maniacally. The sound was deafening. The fleshy raw creature had a spear pierced through it that dragged against the floor and wings that seemed broken. I crawled onto my bed and watched the demonic being continue to walk towards me like a stumbling insect. It even pressed its hands firmly down onto the metal spikes and they went clean through without so much as an audible reaction. I didn't want to die, especially not to this thing. So, I did the only thing I could think of. Asparina. I'm done. No more torture, no more suffering. You must give a name, she said suddenly from the left of me. She had once again appeared out of thin air. Greg Ferris. My bully from high school. A name has been given, she said before snapping her fingers, dispelling the woeful creature. I closed my eyes and laid my head back. My body was covered in sweat and I was shaking. Bruised, beaten and bleeding, I would rather be dead now that the pain had set back in. From then on, every time Asparina appears, I must give a name. I've already run out of names for people that have done wrong to myself and those around me. I'm beginning to wonder if I should offer my name instead. I started this anyway. I tried to give her political authorities, dictators, people on death row, none of that worked. You have no connection to those names. She would say. So what happens when I truly do not have any more to give? Be careful what you wish for.